Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our April 2018 monthly webinar. Thank you all for joining us today for Music of the Moment, Poetry Inside and Outside the Classroom with Catch the Next author mentor, Richie Marrufo. Richie David Marrufo is a native El Pasoan and teaches English at El Paso Community College. He is the current project director of the Barbed Wire Open Mic Series, host of the 306 Sessions Concert Series, a music showcase airing on Saturday nights on PBS, KCOS TV. He's host and producer for the Barbed Wire Open Mic Series podcast, an interview-based show centered on the arts, entertainment, education, and entrepreneurship. And he's a writer for the film and production studio Power at the Pass. Richie has traveled and competed in the Southwest United States as a member of El Paso's most recent slam poetry team and has conducted various writing workshops within the city to people of all ages. He's a huge advocate for the voice of the community and the support of local artistic endeavors. From playing music on street corners and mountaintops to speaking in front of classrooms, Richie is happy to share his love for music, poetry, and improvisation with others. And I am happy to turn it right over to you, Richie.
All right. I've been made a presenter. Hi, everyone. How's it going? The screen changed when you made me presenter, but I'm happy to be here. Obviously, a huge fan of Catch Next and what we've been doing. It was great being recently in San Antonio, seeing what you guys are up to. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about metaphorical music, what that means. And a lot of it has to do with engaging students, within activities within the community. If you heard my bio, I'm definitely involved with lots of community literary events, from open mics, poetry slams, readings of all sorts. And I want to speak briefly on that and how important it is to be able to share this with my classes. I feel that it's been very beneficial. One of the things that we do at El Paso Community College is the QEP, the Quality Enhancement Plan, which is encouraging students to learn about the community as a community. And so probably the most popular events that students report going to and enjoying are the open mics, the poetry slams, because it's something that they don't realize is available in there, and more so it's community led. It's a groups of writers, performers, and they can learn so much about the community through the voices of those performing, and realize that they can do that as well. So it's an interesting look, a transition from the academic world to the performing world, and that's why I'm talking about metaphorical music. Let me go ahead and pull open my presentation here. All right, I should have practiced that before doing this. Okay, is it showing my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, let me go and make that full screen there. I want to go over a little bit of the concept now. A lot of you guys probably noticed the unique or strange spelling there of music. What I'm doing here is, I'll talk a little bit about the SIC, the Latin word, in terms of reporting. And then really, I'm just trying to be maybe too clever here with the idea of music. Muse, of course, is misspelled. And so metaphorical music is kind of really my modus operandi when talking about incorporating poetry in the classroom and the community, and a lot of what I do in terms of performance. So I want to talk a little bit about how I form all these ideas. For example, when I think of music, the way it's spelled here, I borrow a little bit from Lorca and his theory and play on duende, right? Which is this unseen force that compels the artist, the creator, that is not sung from the throat, but comes from the soles of the feet, upward. And I think it's something that we all experience. And so one thing that I have right from the first semester is having my students thinking about inspiration, the theme of inspiration, because that's what we think of Muse. And for me, it's music, and also what I like to call the music of language, right? Pretty much all the terms we know alliteration, assonance, and that's stuff that I incorporate in my own writing and love to perform. I mentioned poetry slam, open mics, all that good stuff. So the way I kind of introduce myself to everyone is again, as you saw in the wait, that's the end. Hold on, let me go backwards. Spoilers. That was the beginning of it. All right, that's the beginning. Okay, so one thing that Lydia mentioned, I'm the project director for the Barbed Wire Open Mic series, and through this, I offer extra credit for students, but really even outside of myself, a lot of the English professors do so, and also we're part of the QEP program. We have a program called the Tejano Passport Program, and it encourages students to get involved with community events. And it's definitely a lot more than just the open mic series. But the director of that, Andy Quiros at EPCC, reports that we're probably the most highly rated, and it's really fun because students get to go out and have a good time, and I love getting to host that, MC that, really kind of drive things along. One of the things that I make sure that I do as a host for these events is the same thing I do in every classroom I teach, which is to make sure that everyone feels welcome. I use the phrase welcome when welcoming everyone. That's really the goal, and I encourage everyone to feel free to feel free. And through that, I get to experience so many types of performances and types of writing, including songwriting. So we get a lot of singer-songwriters, acoustic performers, and the things that they're writing about are things that, especially our students are going through, loneliness, depression, joys, triumphs. And it's a great way for people to connect and become a community. As you can see here, this is actually a picture from last year. We had an open mic, and we invited creative writing students from EPCC to share their work. And so it's a little hard to see there, but we have a pretty good sea of people and students ready to share their work. And just by creating a community here with everyone, I think there's a new sense of joy and experience. And that's something I always want to bring in my classroom is share the joy of creation, of expression, and really a supportive community. And that's one of the things we create through the open mic. Now, through the open mic, I've also created the BWOMS podcast, which is an interview-based show. This was also mentioned in the introduction, and it's an arts, culture, and music show, education, of course, as well. I've had Dr. Lydia Sidevaca, of course, as a guest on the show, and I've also interviewed Jorge Gomez, one of my colleagues, and we talked about Kurt Vonnegut's Harrison Bergeron on an episode. Well, it wasn't really an episode; it was kind of like an auxiliary thing, but he was able to share it with students, and that was a lot of fun. Pretty good feedback on that episode, and the podcast is really fun. I teamed up with my production partners here at Power at the Pass. This is where I'm recording from right now, actually. Valentin Sandoval, who you all know as an author mentor, and his involvement with CTN, and Mr. Don Shapiro, who owns the building and is really kind of leading the way in a lot of the projects we're doing in the city. And so, I've had writers on the show. That's one of the things I kind of want to emphasize are writers, and of course, sharing these with these students, sharing these interviews with students, very much like TED Talks or other podcasts. I think it's always great to have another perspective. And, for example, this is an episode where we had 4 California poets who were traveling along the border. They had a cool tour. I'm sure maybe you even know some of them, Las Peregrinas, and all of them kind of read from their newly published works or coming out. And I'm just trying to cover all sorts of fronts in terms of how can I help get content to people. One of the issues that I've had with students is they just don't realize that these things are available, and again, get reported back pretty good results. The other thing that this has kind of led to, and as being an author mentor, one of my absolute joys is being able to present workshops to all sorts of ages. And so it's that time of year. We all know April, semester's winding down. It's already intense enough, but it's also Poetry Month, and really one of the joys I've been able to have, in addition to, of course, just having my own classes, is to get invited to schools. For example, this is a local high school, Jefferson High School, and I got to perform and present on poetry in front of juniors and seniors. And you know, to me, it's just important to for them to see someone like me, someone who looks just like them, that is became a professor and educator, and also a performer, seeing that they can do it too. And it's really fun to see everyone's eyes light up and see what kind of things we have to offer. This led to, of course, creation of a TV show that's, you know, I run every Sunday, and we invite people to share their work as well as an open mic, and it's a music showcase. And it's led to other events like getting to perform on radio, our local NPR station, KTEP. I've been a guest several times on the Words on a Wire program, which is led by Daniel Chacon and Tim Hernandez, both excellent authors as well, and get to share poetry and talk about the local literary scene. It's been very fun. One of my favorite things is get to perform with musicians. That's kind of a little bit of the metaphorical music portion, which I'm going to get to in just a moment, of course. But here is a cool event that I got to perform with some of the best jazz musicians in El Paso, some of the poetry. I would have invited them here on the webinar, but I'm sure it would have been hard fitting them into the room, and they're all working and busy. And of course, probably one of my absolute joys is working with students. And so the El Paso Community College dance team ended up hearing someone ended up hearing one of my poems, and ended up writing a choreographing a piece centered around it. And so last year we were able to turn it into a performance program. And so there's a little bit of picture right there of them performing and me up there on stage acting a fool. But that one's called Keep It Cosmic. I'll probably share that with you guys today. So back to metaphorical music. Of course, when we think of metaphors, we think of figurative language and the kind of imagery we can create when writing. You know, even if I'm not teaching creative writing class, I like to bring up these concepts because I feel that it really does connect with students, having them kind of think a little bit more about their own metaphors. And again, pairing that with music, right? And then the way, again, expressing the way I've created that. Well, I haven't created it, but I just kind of like this little way of sharing music as a way of spelling, mainly because it's a little bit more modern, you know, kind of showing that grammar doesn't have to be as stringent. Like when we create, we have a little bit of flexibility and more so language. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my camera here. Let me do that. Oh, I turned it off instead. Okay, hey. All right, so why do I do that with the term? And so to kind of explain that, I'm going to dive into a book that I have here called Free Play. It's kind of backwards. Free Play, The Power of Improvisation in Life and in the Arts by Stephen Nachmanovich. That's one of my main interests, both academically and just as a socially, the idea of improvisation and how we use it in everyday life, whether it be through conversation, language, or music. And at the very beginning of this book, the author explains this Sanskrit word called lila. That's Lila, lila, which means play. So one of the things I'm referring to is the playfulness of language. Oftentimes we get too caught up in the rigidity of it all, you know. And so one of the things I try to encourage is the playfulness. When we're kids, we want to be able to kind of change things around like we do with Legos and blocks. And so the playfulness is something that's both childish and disarming, but at the same time is, you know, the play of the cosmos, the folding, unfolding of a moment, what I call the breath of a moment. And that's one of the things that I encourage students to try and reach out for, which again, I think encourages writing through the senses, right? That kind of sensory language that makes descriptive writing so much more tangible and realistic to, you know, from going to a writer to an audience. So that's what I'm doing with metaphorical music, is kind of negotiating this type of play that Nachmanovich talks about here in the book. And of course, I have a bunch of other textbooks and materials that I use when I study improvisation. One of my favorites is by the author Daniel Belgrad. You can see that it's The Culture of Spontaneity. And, he talks about, in particular, how post-World War II, the arts, whether it be visual arts, sculpture, music, poetry, writing, get a lot more spontaneous. And that's his thesis. And the thing that I kind of draw from that is what ties it all together is the breath, the ability to breathe, something that we take for granted a lot of time, a lot of the times, to just simply slow things down and breathe, right? It's so important. And a lot of times I actually do incorporate breathing exercises at the beginning of my classes because it helps calm students down, especially this time of semester. We're running around and we forget that just very simple thing. And so there's a really good animated GIF online of that represents a breath, and it's very slow. It's like a shape, and it expands and it contracts. And I like to play that at the beginning of my class before we really start. The students walk in, and I encourage them to just breathe along, and it really does, settle people down, get them more relaxed and really more open. Something about it just really works. And so to maybe kind of bring a lesson in, right? Speaking of breath, I do want to share some of my poems, some of my pieces that I perform publicly. But before I get into that, there's one thing that helps is to incorporate more modern readings, modern poets. And so one of my favorite poets is a performer by the name of Guante, 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 kind of like glove. He's an artist out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and he has a poem here. I'm actually going to pull it out here so I can read it out loud to you guys, called The Pragmatist's Guide to Faith. And this one is about legacy and how even though obstacles we face are deeply entrenched products of history, so is our resistance to them. Every activist, every survivor, everyone fighting for what they believe in, and however they want to define that, we are all products of something bigger than our own perspective. And we can draw encouragement from that. We can draw power from that. And so this piece has been received pretty well by my students. It's a little bit of a spoken word piece, and of course it's written. If you want, I can email it to you guys as well a little later. I can leave my email, or we can contact each other somehow. All right, so this is from Guante, A Pragmatist's Guide to Faith. This is the art of drawing breath, of making visible what has been invisible. This is a pragmatist's guide to faith. This is singing when you don't know how to pray. Welcome to this space. Know that you are not welcome here. We are all trespassers. We are not welcome here. This universe would like nothing more than for you to not exist. And the proof is in the history you live. Tell me this. What are the odds that this planet would appear in just the right place with the right atmosphere and geology? What are the odds that life would suddenly spark in the darkness from the carcass of this planet to a colony? What are the odds that this anomaly would spread? What are the odds it would survive and stay ahead of volcanic eruptions, meteorites, and earthquakes? The first drum, first beat, first rhythm, first break, first time the notes broke to form a system. You could hear the first melody, the first multi-celled organism. What are the odds that the first location to harbor life would meet another, maybe fight or maybe harmonize? But either way, it would survive. But either way, it would evolve. So what are the odds it would evolve to walk and not crawl, to fly but not fall, to survive every single mass extinction? What are the odds of your existence? How many generations did it take to make you? How many plagues, wars, and massacres conspired to uproot your family tree and salt the earth around it? How many ancestors carried your life? How many ancestors carried your fire? How many farmers made it through the famine? How many runaway slaves got away? How many soldiers conscripted, deserted? How many times did the chain almost break? How did your great-grandparents meet? What was the song playing when you were conceived? Is it inconceivable that happenstance inherit in this life you have inherited? Some see the elegant complexity of bodies or the natural beauty of this planet and they say it's godly. That's got to be divine intelligence behind it all because the odds that you would make it on your own are so small. But me, I see millennia trying to murder you. I see 1,000 generations of pain and fear. I see struggle inscribed into your skeleton, and I see you still here. Ancestor armor, star-crossed survivor, an unwelcome guest and in a hostile environment. Defiance is your birthright. Fire from the first time you drew breath. A smile on your face. Welcome to this space. Know that you are not welcome here. We are all trespassers. We are not welcome here. So if our drawing breath is blasphemy, sin, or treason, let's keep drawing breath until there's nothing left to breathe in. We are the codes that our ancestors still speak in. So that is called A Pragmatist's Guide to Faith by Guante, and students react really well to that. Hold on, I just realized I got updates during that. Can you guys see the screen?
Richie, if you want to, first of all, thank you for that poem.
Yeah.
That was awesome. I think if you turn off your screen sharing, we should just be able to see your webcam view. Yeah, there we go.
Oh, so you didn't get to see the performance of it all?
No, we can still see you.
Oh,
Yeah,
but
no,
it was
no,
like
yeah.
split screen.
Definitely,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, that's good because I was kind of reading and then like, did my alerts come on?
No, we could definitely still see you. We got it. No, it was perfect.
Anyway, so that's a poem that I've had students respond to very well. It talks about resistance. It talks about ancestry. It kind of talks about, you know, kind of brings, as my colleague Jorge Gomez said the other day, the cosmic to the personal. You know, talking about family history, and I just think it's an interesting perspective. And when we have a classroom discussion on a close reading of that, you know, of course, I like to incorporate the strong line activity where, you know, I have them read it and look over and choose a line that they love. And the way I like to say it is, you know, choose a line that resonates within your bones, you know, that shakes your soul, that makes you feel something, you know, something that you can relate to. And like I said, I've had pretty great responses to that poem, doing that as a classroom activity. Now, what I actually like to incorporate too, of course, like I said, is as the semester goes on, I make sure to, you know, have a segment to quote the great songwriter Marvin Gaye, right? What's going on? And so, you know, as students are getting to class, I also like to kind of fill them in of activities going around campus, you know, things that they can check out, art shows, theaters, you know, plays, open mics, and all that. And once they start to dive into that, they just ask for more. What else is there? What else is there? And it really kind of, you know, by engaging outside, it really does kind of coming back to classroom. You know, they're more happy to just engage with our ideas that we're talking about with readings. I think they just start to experience more of a liberation of mind and freedom, and realizing that it's a world of ideas and culture, and they're part of it. You know, one of the things that I try and stress through sharing all this with them is that we shouldn't just consume culture. We got to be producers of culture, right? And with that said, how much time do we have? I lost my clock. Okay, maybe
It's about 3:30 right now, so yeah, maybe about like 10 minutes or so.
Okay, cool. And so what I'd like to share maybe is then of course as the semester goes on, they always want to hear about my own writing, my own poems, and that's a huge like I said, I showed you the pictures earlier of me getting to speak and perform. Uh, one thing that Dr. Chavez always mentions is her students listening to one of my performances, and really I always like to preface with a joke, and this is what they were talking about. I always warn people that my spirit animal is like a quesadilla, which is kind of cheesy. It's corny and cheesy, you know, corn quesadilla. Now, I used to tell that joke all the time, but one time I was told that it could be culturally appropriative spirit animal, and I took that criticism to heart. And so nowadays when I say it, I just kind of go to the Harry Potter world and just say that my Patronus is a quesadilla. And yeah, and that just like double geeks it out some reason somehow. Anyway, so with that said, I have a poem I'd like to share with you guys of my own. It's called Windblown World, and it's a reference to El Paso and all the artists. And this is dedicated to you guys listening right now. Okay, here we go. Incoherent mumblings are the inept incantations drawn from the abyss of my pen's empty kiss. I've had many poems eaten by the clumsy dance of a backspace button. You are my work in progress. Isn't that all we ever are? See, I want to make music. I want that dark, smoky, aromatic tone that legends like Lester Young, Ben Webster, and Art Lewis painted their masterpieces in, when there was nothing left to yearn for, to culminate and orchestrate inky sonic thumbprints soaked in the lusty allure of dark corridors and light post forever musings of stardust flicker flame passageways. 5:07 a.m. The cosmos are crunched, and stacks of what have you nonsensical rumblings ruminate on the frothy, jazz-licked rememberings of your familiar afterkiss. Perhaps this sensitive heart is penance from a past life, for even a tangential universe such as this can explode a kiss into atomic whiplash. This is your love song. So when life is bringing you down, don't forget that ever essential elemental presence and breath, like here, breathe with me. I sling freeform bebop impulses into a Chuco skyline. Sonic smoke signals that swirl and twirl into the air and become misguided mockingbird melodies in search of its music. You sing sandstorm rebop rememories. Cuando yo te vi, mi corazón bailó. Cuando yo te vi, mi corazón bailó. See, there are 100,000 heartbeats in a day, but the ones that sound like jazz are for you. All right, and that's the poem. I don't know how to end that. Usually I just kind of step away from the mic or just kind of do one of these. I could have done that. So that's Windblown World. And one of the things I like to do with that is, again, talking about the playfulness of language. I like to kind of refer to the musicality of language. So I like to use a lot of repetitions and sounds. And meter and rhythm. There's a little bit of a hip hop element to it, and it's fun. So that one's called Windblown World. And kind of to kind of sum up, I do other pieces as well around the city that incorporate other elements. Earlier I mentioned how one of my pieces was turned into a dance piece by some other EPCC dance team. And that was really cool to see, to see the collaboration between different forms, mediums of expression. And so one of the things that I'll end with this one. I teamed up with a group of local artists, and I've been doing it every year now. But the first piece that I did is for a painting that they did, and I should have had that. I don't have it anywhere around here. It's probably in the studio somewhere. But it's a painting of a fox standing in the desert with like a cactus and nopal, and it's nighttime, and the fox, instead of its head, it's like a skull, the fox skull. And I thought it was interesting, and so I ended up writing a poem, and I'll end with this one. It's called Desert Rituals, and it's pretty much a meditation on the region, the Southwest, the border, and the cultures that we encompass. All right, here we go. First, there was the fox, and then so much more, as Brother Bear beckons breath, blows the conch, creates the blues and blessings of creation. Ay permiso, let us through to thrive. In the desert, you can hear the sounds of existence, breathing in and out towards persistence, where living to be living and living before living, but death wears the mask of the living. We are society transcendent in incandescent light and dust. Dead stars ignite to incite the unique verse of our universe, as twin-circled universal moons elevate to reveal axiomatic truths. If we must die, we must die, but not until we have lived. Mira, el sol, la luna, bodies of light and yearning, return from the ether of timelessness. Bloom, children of the cosmos. It is like the nopalito growing in the desert. You are not alone. You are just the beginning. Sprout seeds of mandala meanderings and stand triumphantly under the glow of a hungry moon, because the dance of life and death reveals itself to those who listen. Breathe in. Breathe out. These are our sacred desert visions, our residual spiritual individual rituals in tune with the collective, because first there was the fox, and then so much more, as Brother Bear beckons breath, blows the conch, and creates the blues and blessings of creation. Ay, permiso. All right, and that's that one. And that one's fun to perform in front of people because I usually incorporate Native American flute that I have, that I get to loop with musicians and bands and sounds. And really, that's just my joy in getting to write and perform. I'd love to share more, but I think we're running out of time, and actually didn't have time to set up some of the instruments I was hoping to set up. But really, again, the takeaway points is getting to see. I mean, really, just kind of by being myself and doing this, being involved in the community, all the projects that I'm a part of, the open mic, the poetry slams, the readings, um, inviting people to understand again, once again, that you can also be a producer of culture and not just a consumer of it, and sharing your own voice, and that's so important to our students. And I think we all understand this, uh, the necessity of being able to share your voice, your stories, and really those are just mine. One, stories of joy, because I want to bring back the joy in academia and performance and just sharing. And I guess at this time, if anyone wants to have, actually, I don't know if I had any questions or anything. Let me see.
Yeah, so we can go ahead and open up to Q&A. One of the nice things about this format is, since we have our college practitioners here and attending, it could
Cool.
also maybe open up to some invitations to you too, so that people can hear more of your poetry, hopefully, in person.
Okay.
Yeah, so I just wanted to thank you so much for this. I always thoroughly enjoyed the April webinars, because it does feel like a bit of a release here at the end of the semester, and it is a pleasure to get to listen to some poetry. And I really, really appreciate your focus on the breath as well.
Mm.
And I really like that idea of thinking about starting class with, getting students to do some breathing exercises and
Hmm.
things like that. Um, I just had one quick question. So while people are thinking about their questions, if anybody has a question, feel free for Richie, feel free to use the hand raise feature, or you can type it in the questions pane and I'll read it for you as well. Or you can type it in the chat pane and we can all see it. I loved both of your poems. I mute my mic so it doesn't interfere with the speaker, but I was like clapping and laughing and everything
Oh yeah, yeah.
as you were reading. But my question is actually about the One poem, The Pragmatist's Guide to Faith. One of the things I really liked about it was how he has so many questions in there in the
Mm-hmm.
poem itself. And I was wondering, well, I was thinking about that poem could be used in a lot of different ways, even in freshman composition classes.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was wondering, well, one of the ways I was thinking of using it was as the question, using the questions to get students to, yes, select a strong line, but also maybe like pick one of those questions and then answer it, like do some
Hmm.
research to answer it as a way of like introducing research. Like, how
Yeah,
did your great grandparents meet? What was the song playing when you were conceived? You
that's such a funny question, right?
know?
Or if you can
Yeah.
envision it, I definitely do invite writing responses or creative writing responses to those, depending on the class, really. Whether we look at it through analytically. Uh, that's actually a very good point, though. There are a lot of questions, and I would love to see if any students would take. I would probably have that more for extra credit for most of my classes, but
Hmm.
I think that'd be really fun to see their responses, and it
Yeah,
also shows how in terms of art and literature we can respond to it, and that's
absolutely.
yeah.
Well, even in like bringing in the sciences, like
Mm,
thinking about those physics questions and biology questions and stuff
mm,
like that.
mhm. Yeah, I mean I think there's a little bit of something for everyone in that sense, because I like the way he talks about creation, the formation of Earth. Like, what are the
Hmm.
chances that this would happen? And sparking, as he says, spark kind of curiosity out of the darkness.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's
Did you
pragmatist.
ever?
And excuse me.
No, I was wondering if you ever had situations where somebody goes a little too far into the darkness, and how do we, I guess, spark hope
Mm,
as part of that reflection?
wow, that's a good question. Yeah, somebody like a student or.
Right, right.
Mm,
If we have a kid that is depressed and is kind of
mm,
fatalistic,
mm,
have you seen many writings from them that reflect that kind of state of mind? And if so, how does a teacher that is not
mm.
really a counselor address that?
Ah.
And do you even would you even refer to a counselor? I think it's great because it gets you to think both ways. But at
Mhm.
the same time, we know that we have a lot of kids in the news that go a little bit too deep.
Mm.
And so, I was just, it made me think about that.
I think that's absolutely pertinent, and for those of us that do teach composition and writing, get to learn so much about our students. Some things that kind of I'm often surprised by the things that students are willing to share.
Right.
Um, Part of it is I do encourage complete openness. I tell them no judgment. Just I want you guys to work on your writing and being able to express yourself so we can get better at all the techniques, and so I can learn about who you are as a writer, because there's no one way to write either. You learn how everyone's kind of individually shaped and so on. And so when it gets to that, that's interesting. I've definitely had students kind of share. No, thankfully, no kind of murderous or crazy thoughts that they've shared, but definitely who have been going through hard times, that are struggling, and it definitely helps me understand them a little bit more. Sometimes, if I know they're missing class and stuff, I can reach out to them. But you're right, maybe up to a certain point, I think it's maybe worth pushing them towards counseling see what we can do. I definitely like to have one-on-one conversations with my students whenever I get work back to them, and give them feedback. So that's a hard one to assess. I definitely like to hear other people's thoughts on that kind of situation. Um, but I think that creating an openness in dialogue and discussion is so important, but you kind of have to first set up that environment. I don't think it comes easily. You kind of have to, through persistence and just kind of the way you go about running your classroom, can get to that point of
Right.
openness. That yeah.
Right.
But I would definitely love to hear the people's thoughts. If not now, at some point.
Hmm. Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think that's, part of the reason why we have counselors in our programs too, is
Mm,
because, um, if we're building trust in the classroom like we're supposed to, in a way that, or if we're leading a classroom in a way that fosters trust, um, then it will open up to students sharing. And that's exactly what we want, is for them to author their own stories and to find their voice in our classes. And so, but yeah, at the same time, besides just being, a sympathetic listener and an attentive listener, I think, yeah, it's important to know what resources to be able to, sort of direct students to and things like that.
Absolutely.
Well, I think it picks on the same theme that you mentioned regarding collaboration, like when you collaborated with the dancing troupe. So it's a matter of extending to other entities within the institution. And of course, that's one of the things that we promote, trying to be interdisciplinary and wanting to provide, like a web of support. I wanted to follow up, if you don't mind, for those cities that don't necessarily have an open wire option, or the teachers in the class are not really familiar with this option for their students. How could one, how could a teacher bring that kind of experience in the classroom if they have no experience doing this? Um, and and basically in your class, obviously you do some poetry, but you have to cover all these other things in the curriculum. How do you balance, I guess, how much time is giving to all that needs to be done within an English composition course, things you need to cover, versus this creative outlet to help them join the world of ideas?
All right. So I think there's several things that you kind of asked here. First was if in terms of resources, if for example someone's teaching in a place where maybe there aren't, or at least aren't as visible community events or resources like an open mic or a poetry slam. In that case, thanks to, I think, the ever increasing presence of technology on campuses, one thing that I would recommend is maybe, like, if you guys use what is not WebCT anymore, Blackboard, or there's always an option for like maybe extra links. There's Bun Poetry series, there's a poetry slam videos and all that kind of stuff that maybe students could look into. I would definitely, that'd be kind of a cool like scavenger hunt, like outside of the curriculum, because as you're saying, even just in terms of class time, it's hard to already as it is, because of what needs to be covered, to spend an exorbitant amount of time on like maybe sharing something in class, but maybe encouraging students again outside of the classroom. And that's one of the things that we've discussed with the QEP stuff at EPCC, right? Learning about the classroom as learning about the community as a community by encouraging them to go like outside of class time to these events, and maybe offering extra credit or some sort of incentive, maybe writing about extra writing, like how they experienced an event. Now, if that's not available in their city, or the other thing is resources. Some students can't drive to these events and so on. Maybe in that case, I would open it up to online content, because again, the technology to do that, I think, is thankfully not as limited anymore. Like more people can afford recording equipment, audio equipment, so there's more stuff out there. So even I would encourage students to go find stuff on their own, like things that they like. There are some resources that we can share with them.
Great.
Like we mentioned, TED Talks. That's a whole library resource, and I tell them about that. And then there's podcasts and so on that might be a little bit more available to students in those situations. And in terms of actual class time, that's just up to the instructor. I always anyway like to start off, even if it's like I don't know what you guys call them, like buzzer beaters, or like the first 10-15 minutes of class incorporate some sort of like brief writing journal or something. It might be then, as students come into class, maybe be sharing these things. Yeah.
One of the things, one of our other peer mentors, Angela Valenzuela, she has a community-based nonprofit here called, in Austin, called Nuestro Grupo. And she has the whole committee, and they lead a Saturday school that's a bilingual school for 4th and 5th graders, and it teaches a Mexican-American studies-based curriculum to these 4th and 5th graders. And it's also part of her teacher development, Grow Your Own Teacher movement that she works on. And I've been to a few of the committee meetings, and every single committee meeting, I mean, they're serious, they're getting work done, but every single committee meeting starts with Floricanto. Every single one, whether it's somebody actually singing or a poem or somebody reading a poem. So it doesn't have to be your work, but it's kind of like when you were talking about the breathing exercise, it reminded me of that. And I just think sometimes it's easy to forget that, you know, yes, we're pressed for time, but sometimes taking time with Floricanto or with breathing actually makes time in the end, right?
Because it helps focus and center people. And it has that effect, at least that I've noticed. I'd love to hear other, you know, how other people, what they do, you know, at the beginning of classes or meetings to get things going. Yeah. But that was the quesadilla joke too, you know. That was interesting hearing that feedback too, you know. I think it's important to kind of listen to constructive criticism. And I believe that's the one you were talking about, Dr. Chavez, was
that quesadilla with cheese or something.
Corny and cheesy, yeah.
Yeah.
Because you can be corny, you can be cheesy, but when you're corny and cheesy, you know, the bad one.
Well, I always think of enchilada when I think with cheese, but yes, that must have been the one. Right.
But you know, that is something that I did find pretty interesting, though, is when someone commented on the, you know, is it culturally appropriative, you know, to include that in a joke. And so you know, one of the things I teach out of that moment is, you know, being able to listen to that and also maybe adapt and improvise. So, you know, like I said, I ended up changing the joke to, instead of saying spirit animal, to Patronus, which is essentially, you know, in Harry Potter universe, you know, a representation of an animal of some sort through their wand. And people usually, you know, it narrows down the audience a little bit of people who get it, I guess, because you've had to know the whole Harry Potter thing. But, you know, that's, even then, that was a learning moment for me, just even off of that bad joke.
Well, thank you so much, Richie. Thank you for sharing your poetry with us and some of your teaching practices. This has been really incredible. So thank you.
Thank you to everyone who listened and is watching right now on YouTube.
Yes. Excellent. Have a wonderful day. Thank you much.
You too. Bye.
Bye.